Welcome to our weekly program, The Inside Story of Chabad in America through the Mindel Archives. Since we are now a few days before Yutas Kislev, we all know the Yontif of Chag HaGeula, with the Alter Rebbe, the author of the Tanya, Shulchan Aruch. The Tanya is called the Torah Biksav of Chassidus. And as I once spoke, and of course, the Yutas Kislev is the time that we start saying the Tanya every day from the beginning. We once said that by Chassidim, there are bemis 4 big Yomim Tovim, especially Yom Tovim, if I bring a lot. First of all, the Yontif of Purim we mentioned. Excuse me. Purim, the Goyim wanted to kill the Jewish bodies, and they saw that they didn't win. We hung Haman, so it was a miracle. So they said, we couldn't get rid of the bodies. So that was Nes of Purim. They saw they couldn't get rid of the bodies. They said, let's go to the neshama of a yid. Let's get rid of the soul of a yid. That's the Yontif of Chanukah. As it says, La'ashkicham Torah, forget La'avirim b'chuki l'tzarecho. Learn Torah, no problem, but don't say it's the Eibish's Torah. As we know, we already once spoke about it. That's called the neshama of Torah. Now they saw that they couldn't get rid of the guf, the body, and they couldn't get rid of the soul. So they said, now let's start to get rid of the Pinimis HaNeshama, the essence of the Neshama. What is that? That's the Yontif of Yutas Kislev. If Chas v'Sholem, there wouldn't be a Yutas Kislev, I don't know who, we wouldn't be here probably. Chassidus put a life in this world, Yiddishkeit. And that's the essence of the Neshama. And then also, the Seyyid Beis Tammuz is a Yontif that they want to get rid of the Rebbe himself. And that's what they did with the Frierdiker Rebbe. But anyway, so this is the Yontif of Yutas Kislev. And just like Torah was given the 3rd month, Sivan, of 3rd month of Nisan, of Nisan, so the same thing also, the 3rd month after Tishrei is the month of Kislev. That's the Chag HaGeula, and that's where we start learning the Tanya. So it says in a sefer, there's a sefer I think from a Rishon, Shamin HaShomayim, that Rishon said that it will come a time that by Yidden, Klal Yisrael, Yutas Kislev will be a Yontif by Klal Yisrael. And as the Frierdiker Rebbe writes, that we say Yutas Kislev by Chassidim, we say L'shon HaTova, B'limud HaChassidus, U'vedarkei HaChassidus, Tikosev is the Chazim. It's a big Yontif, Yutas Kislev. And Mitzvah Hashem, in a few days, is the Yontif of Yutas Kislev. Now, I'm not going to say the whole story of Yutas Kislev. We already, I think last year, 2 years ago, we spoke about the whole Maisa of Yutas Kislev. But today, I want to do with you the introduction, even though it's printed, but this is the Ksav Yad that I have, that the Rebbe wrote an introduction to the English Tanya that Rabbi Mindel wrote, translated. And this is the Ksav Yad of the Rebbe. The Rebbe himself wrote an introduction. The Rebbe didn't write introductions to too many people, but to Rabbi Mindel's, there's another one that the Sefer that he wrote the introduction, but Tanya is one of the wrote an introduction. Now, as I told you, that when Rabbi Mindel completed the translation of the English Tanya, I mentioned that a few weeks ago, he gave it to the Rebbe. The Rebbe, the first copy, the Rebbe grabbed with a smile, and that's when it was in the early 60s, in the late 50s, the Sputnik then. So the Rebbe said, "Was macht man a Tummel von dem Sputnik? Mit auf machen a Tummel that the first translation English Tanya came out. This is what they were waiting for. This is what the Frierdiker Rebbe hoped, that he gave him even from Riga, 10 years before that this should be done to open up the world, Chassidus, which is the English. And Rabbi Mindel was the one who was Zeicha to do this. So he said, why do you make a tumult of the Sputnik? We have to make a tumult that the first copy of Tanya, English Tanya, came out. And then the Rebbe wrote notations. I have, many notations the Rebbe wrote at the Tanya. The Rebbe's handwriting. I don't know, 1 second, I have over here. It's all notations. The Rebbe wrote in Hebrew, the Rebbe wrote in English, notations and the Tanya. But I want to share with you first what the Rebbe wrote separately here. First of all, the Rebbe asked, Rabbi Mindel was he got his PhD not only he got his PhD in many subjects. And one of the things was English. So he was an English person. He knew English very well. So the Rebbe told him, I'm going to sometimes write English, but if I make a mistake in spelling, you should correct me. And Rabbi Mindel told me that many times the Rebbe corrected him in certain spelling, which is in Shulchan Aruch, even here. So that's besides the point. So the Rebbe writes a separate, just a few points. First of all, he writes, talking about Tanya, Melukot mipisforim u'mipisoifrim g'doshe elyon. The cover page of the Tanya, the Shablat it's called, is gathered from Sfarim and Seifrim. That means he didn't write it himself. The Rebbe just writes points. The Rebbe's Ksav. Who was it? The Zohar, he gathered. Shaloh HaKodesh, the Baal Shem Tov, and that result. And he gathered, and everything that a person, I think this is what it means here, that to help people that struggle, natural personalities, people that struggle. This is the Tanya. It's called Sefer Shel Beinanim. And everything is in that Sefer. Everything is here. Meaning like this. Some people said, why do I have to learn Tanya? I can do the same thing. I can learn Zohar, which a person could. A person can learn Arizal. A person can learn the Ksovim to learn from the Baal Shem. And they'll also be able to get to what the Tanya is. That's what the Tanya did. So the Rebbe said over here two things. Number one, why does a person have to struggle and go over and learn the whole thing? It'll take him years and years and years, and he might not even come to the end. When the Alter Rebbe, or it's like a Shulchan Aruch, well, the Alter Rebbe already has it in Tanya. He did it for you. And maybe you won't even come to understand exactly what it means. But the Alter Rebbe probably knew better than you, and he did it already. This is Tanya. So Tanya is really an answer for the people that struggle. This is a point here they mentioned. Another thing he says, just two words. This is here. Arucha uktsara. Arucha Tanya is there's long, short, long. So the Rebbe said Musar Chassidus. I guess what it means is the Chassidus is called Arucha. It's long, but it's short. Meaning, when you learn Chassidus, you might not get to what you need. You might not get an answer right away. But after learning Tanya, you'll get the answer. Musar could be Ktsara. Musar, you'll tell you right away, if you do this, you'll get Gehenim, or you get something is going to happen to you, or whatever you get by Yisaitis. But it might go away. It's short, but it's a long way. You might not get to the point. So this is, I guess, what it means. Aruch Tzor. This is one of the things over here that he mentions. Then he says over here, he writes with his handwriting the pasuk. The Rabbi's handwriting, the pasuk. Here also, I mean, it's all ksovim. The pasuk of the last Moshe Rabbeinu's tzavoah. Well, this was the Tanya is based on that, and he writes the whole pasuk. Ki ha-mitzvah hazois asher anochi mitzavcha hayoim loy nifleis hi bimcha v'loy rechoike hi loy bashomayim hi leimer miyala lonu hashomayim v'yikochel lonu v'yashvi'enu oiso v'naseno v'loy me'ever hayam v'liyam hu leimer miyaver lonu alever hayam v'yikochel lonu v'yashvi'enu oiso v'naseno. This is I copied from here. This is the original that the Rebbe wrote, the Rebbe's handwriting. It's easier for me when I copy that because it's hard to read the Rebbe's handwriting. This was he wrote. So Rabbi Mindel wrote on that the Sefer Shal Beinanim is a Sefer. He writes intermediate type, whose moral position is between the righteous and wicked. The Alter Rebbe concern is not tzaddik or roshe, but with average or moderate, whose rank is within reach of every person. Sefer Shal Beinanim. He was the author. It took him 25 years. He writes over here, and so this is a like I just want to say Hakdama that the Rebbe wrote when he about the Tanya. I mean, there's a lot of ksavim. I mean, people have to study the ksav of the Rebbe, what he wrote, his notation about Tanya. But now I want to read to you the introduction that the Rebbe himself, also ksav, wrote on the English Tanya, and that was probably the first time, because nobody else wrote the Tanya before, and as I'll read you in a minute what the Rebbe said, people tried and they didn't succeed. So any translation, I guess, that was done after the translation in Yiddish or whoever, that's all based on the English Tanya. That's what Rabbi Mindel wrote. That's what it seems. I'll just read to you word for word what the Rebbe wrote. And that's in English. The Rebbe used to write a script. As the Alter Rebbe, author of the Tanya, pointed out in one of his other works, any of the 70 tongues, when used as an instrument to disseminate the Torah and mitzvahs, is itself elevated, thereby from its earthly domain into the sphere of holiness. When he writes in another language, while at the same time serving as a vehicle to draw the Torah and mitzvahs from above downward to those who read and understand this language. This is the mile of English, I guess. In the spirit of the above mentioned remarks, the volume presented here means this Tanya that Rabbi Mindel wrote, the first English translation of the Tanya since its first appearance 165 years ago, this was then, is an event of considerable importance. It brings this basic work of Chabad philosophy and way of life to a wider range of Jews to whom the original work presents a language problem or even a barrier. It is thus a further contribution to the dissemination of the fountains of Hasidus, which were unlocked by Rabbi Yisrael Baal Shem, who saw Hasidus as a stream of living waters, growing deeper and wider until it should reach every segment of the Jewish people and bring new inspiration and vitality into their daily lives. Now, he finishes off here, the Rebbe. The Rebbe's Ksav. The translation of such a work as the Tanya presents a formidable task. As a matter of fact, several unsuccessful attempts had been made at various times in the past to translate the Tanya into one or another of the European languages. It is therefore to the lasting credit of Dr. Nissim Mindel that this task has been accomplished. And then the Rebbe finishes off, needless to say, translations are at best inadequate substitute for the original. It is confidently hoped, however, that the present translation, provide as it is with an introduction, glossary, notes, and index, will prove a very valuable aid to students of Chassidus in general and Chabad particular, and the Rebbe signs his name in this. So this is what the Rebbe wrote. The Rebbe gave Rabbi Dr. Mindel a credit, even though Dr. Mindel was not a doctor then yet, because he didn't get his PhD then. But you see, the Rebbe saw ahead of time that, and he put here the word Dr. Mindel. And as we all know, that the Sefer Tanya, I think there was Rabbi Lisa Badichever once said, "Where is God?" So you can find God in that little Sefer. This is the Sefer Tanya. And this is the Yitus Kislev, is the time that we start learning Tanya. And I hope the people, this gives a chance, the people that didn't learn Tanya yet should be Taki, should make a good aschala, a good beginning of learning Tanya, starting this Yitus Kislev. In Mitzvah Hashem, next week we'll continue our weekly program. Thank you.